Hello, everybody. That's right. We are back. Your ears are not mistaking you. Myself, Sean, and Owain going through all the things of which the Browns have been up to over the last couple of months. God, it's already been about 2 months since the Super Bowl finished. Over the last couple of months, free agency, take a look at the draft, everything else. We're going to answer some of your questions, some of our questions as well, over the next 45 minutes or so. You're listening to the Believeland Brits podcast. Yep. So apologies for the hiatus. I think it's just the case that life sort of gets in the way as soon as the Super Bowl finishes, just one of those things, really. Obviously, we've had the Super Bowl come and gone. Chiefs once again proving victorious, but we're not here to talk about that. We're not even here to talk about how correct Owain was on most of his hits over the course of the season. We'll save that gloating session for another day. Instead, we're going to jump into everything Browns related, slightly Browns related over the course of the last couple of weeks. First of all, let me just introduce the two beside me here. And I'll just ask you one question, really, which is, do you miss football already, or are you happy for the break? Sean, I'll start with you.
I'm still quite happy for the break, to be honest, at the minute. It doesn't feel like it's been a couple of months. It normally drags the off-season, but I don't know if it's because our team are doing still all right in the Premier League, mate. It's kind of softening the blow a little bit.
How dare you say that just before we play? But for anyone listening that doesn't know, myself and Sean are massive Aston Villa fans. It's definitely softening the blow of how the Browns season ended, but with a big game against Man City tonight without our top striker and our midfield maestro, it's your positivity is infectious, but it might end up being a little bit of an issue tonight, Sean, mate.
It might be, but no, mate, it's a nice break. I think the fact that it's been a relatively quiet off-season, and we'll get into it, I don't think there's been many splashy kind of moves. It probably tells you how good this team really is and how close they were, and hopefully a bit more luck on the injury front, and they should be there or thereabouts, mate. So yeah, fingers crossed. But not missing it too much at the minute, man.
That's a fair assessment. Owain, obviously you're more in the business of playing football rather than watching it in terms of the European kind. At the very least, are you missing Browns football yet? Are you happy with it currently being April, knowing it's a little ways down the road?
No, I'm really missing it, to be honest. I'd love to see it back a lot sooner than what it is. It's obviously a hell of a long wait in the off season. But look, it's the month of the draft. It's always an exciting time. It's one of my favorite times of year, April, sort of in the NFL. I know there's not a ton happening, but it's always exciting to be watching the next generation sort of building up to the biggest day of their lives. And then the draft's always exciting, even if, we're in the sort of position that we're in for the third year in a row where it's not as exciting as usual.
Yeah, but that's something in of itself as well. This is the last year where it doesn't really do much for us. We'll come on to that obviously as well as we go in. But from next season, it will mean something again. So that's exciting in of itself as well. I'm kind of torn between the two. I do love me some Browns football. The Villa is definitely carrying me, though. Cricket season's around the corner. The days are getting lighter. Could I do with the Browns being back sooner? Yeah. Will Frankfurt Galaxy keep me going in the European League of Football until then? Yeah. So, and also I think that you two will keep me going as well as we go through Browns summer periodically as well. We can see that there's quite a few people that have joined on live tonight. First, welcome back, everyone. And to those of you who haven't heard from us before, hello. Please do leave some questions in the comments from wherever it is that you're listening to, if you have any, around Browns activity for the last week or so. Last month or so, really. But, we'd love to hear your questions as well. We did ask around. We've got a few questions that we've canvassed, and a few ourselves. Should be able to cover pretty much everything over the course of the next 45 minutes or so. So, lads, let's jump straight into it, shall we? Biggest thing, obviously, free agency at this time of year, getting new players in. Everyone's looking to improve. I was going to say implode then. A few teams might be looking to do that, but most teams are looking to improve. My question to you both is, what's been your favourite move of this trading free agency window? There's obviously been quite a few. Jerry Jeudy's probably the highest profile of the bunch. I know that one of you will probably not pick Jerry Jeudy in any case. So, Owain, let's start off with you, bud. What do you think has been the best move for the Browns in this window? You can say, by the way, I'm not challenging you not to.
I'm actually going to take Jerry Jeudy as my pick. I'm going to pick him because I think you can look at his career, and I think because of Steve Smith, I think he gets a little bit worse of a rap than what's actually happened in his career. He's been perfectly decent in his career. He's obviously got a lot of pedigree coming in as one of the best receivers in college football. And he's had some pretty shitty QB play, if you're going to be completely honest. Only really had 1 year of good QB play, and that was last year with Russ. And obviously he was battling injuries among other things, such as Steve Smith and the fact that the offense wasn't good in general. So I think there's a ton of upsides to be tapped into. And even if you don't get the upside, I don't think it was a terrible move anyway. I think if you can get 800-900 yards out of him consistently, I don't think it's the worst move in the world for a 5th and 6th. Obviously, those waters get a bit muddied with the contract we handed out to him as well. You'd expect a little bit more out of him after that. But I think the main reason why I like it, I think we've spoken at length over this podcast over the last 2 years, really, about the wide receiver room and how it needed upgrading. And I don't think that they've managed to do it over the whole time that we've been on this podcast. They haven't quite managed to get that done. And you looked at this off season, free agency was going to cost them too much, and they were going to reach on someone that was going to cost too much and produce and not produce enough. And then you look at the draft, we're picking at 54 and haven't really got too much ammo to move up from there as well. So I think the path to upgrading that wide receiver room is always going to be difficult this year, even with the talent that's in this draft class. So I'm glad that they sort of covered all bases by going out and upgrading it before the draft. And then now it puts them in a situation that if someone exciting falls to them at 54 or falls in and around 54, they could grab another one and secure that wide receiver room for years to come.
Yeah, no, there's a lot to unpack there. Obviously, I think that, like you, there's definitely an exciting upside to picking someone like Jerry Jeudy. I think that, the way in which the Browns like to bring in players is very much tied into their guardrails, into what they can see from their intangibles and, the physical side of it and, the potential upside. They've done that they've been quite consistent in that as well. So I don't think it was a very surprising move after I took the chance to let it settle. You don't really think of big swoops in as a very Browns thing to do, but there's usually one or two sprinkled in there. What was interesting for me was the contract. Obviously it's, when it was shown initially, you think, well, that's actually quite a lot on that contract extension. But there is, it was one of the PFF guys, he's actually created a contract value calculator, essentially, to be able to sort of disseminate what the numbers truly mean. And it looks like realistically, this is a 2-year contract at about 15 mil a year. with obviously void years coming after and potential cap maneuverability, etc. But it looks like it's a relatively low risk deal, given more or less to be able to provide that flexibility to move him if needs be, but also to be able to spread some of that needed cap to be able to bring in other players as well, which is something which Berry's been very adamant on being able to do with all of his talent pieces and high earners. So the money doesn't really worry me at all. Sean, in terms of Jerry Jeudy of it all, because he's by far the biggest move, if not a favorite. He's definitely the biggest move. Are there any concerns from this of which you've heard here? Or is it just more a general sort of excitement for once, and one of which we should be hit? It's just good if we hit.
I think it's a gamble. I'll be honest. I think it's a gamble. I'm not overly sold on Jerry Jeudy, the player. I think he's had 4 years in the league and he hasn't necessarily done anything to me that suggests he should be paid like a top 15, 20 wide receiver, which essentially is what that contract he's sort of in the range of. The Browns are obviously banking on the fact that, as Owain said, it's down to the situation he was in, the poor quarterback play, all those other things. What I would throw back is, I think it's fair to say Amari Cooper hasn't had a particularly stellar quarterback play in his tenure in Cleveland. He's had 2,000-yard seasons, something Jerry Jeudy's never managed. I wasn't massively keen on the move because I don't think we've got a lot of draft capital anyway, and throwing 2 more picks away. I could understand why they did that. I really don't like the move with the contract, if I'm honest. I think they should have just played out the year, seen what they had, and then decide whether they're going to pay him or not. They could have even gone down the line of franchise tagging him at the end of one season if they wanted 2 years of seeing what he could or couldn't produce. Feels a little bit like Elijah Moore last year, where again we're making, potentially you could argue, making excuses as to why Elijah Moore didn't necessarily work out last year, potentially not used correctly. Again, the quarterback play, you could argue, indifferent at best. Obviously, going through 4 or 5 different starting quarterbacks, there's lots of reasons you can throw out there. I'm probably not as overly as excited as others. I'll be honest. I think it's one of those. It could look like a brilliant move in 2 years' time. Don't get me wrong; it has the potential to be that. I also think it's got the potential to be one that you look back in 2 years' time and really regret the fact that you dished out that additional contract. I would have been on board for the 5th and 6th at a push. It's still not necessarily something I would have done. I don't know how big his market was. It seems as though the Browns have been in and around Jerry Jeudy for the best part of 18 months. It seemed like a move at the trade deadline, not last season, the season before. It then sort of gathered a little bit of noise again around the trade deadline of last year. But what I would say is I haven't necessarily heard of a number of other teams that have been in there and sniffing around at the same time. So don't know how strong his market was. Look, let's fingers crossed it obviously does work out. The Browns are obviously very much planning on future with it. He's still only 24. I mean, that's the other thing to bear in mind with this. He didn't come into the league, as a 23, 24-year-old out of college. He came in really young, so he has still got time on his side, very much so. And look, certainly in terms of the splashy move, that's the one that's going to generate the most interest. I said right at the outset, didn't I? It's been genuinely quiet. If you're asking me what was my favourite move, it's probably just some of the players that we've brought back. And even then, it's not necessarily Zadarius Smith, who was the big money one.
I was waiting for you to say Corey Bajorquez, to be quite honest.
Yeah, exactly.
I left that wide open for you, to be quite honest.
Corey B. And don't get me wrong, I know we joke about it, but I do think that's good to have a reliable punter there, and the left footer always seems to give you
I breathed a massive sigh of relief, mate. Honestly, that one was left quite long, and you're there thinking, why is that being left for quite as long as it was? But able to see that Insta post and definitely breathing a sigh of relief, because I think he was one of the best players that we had last year. So yeah.
I think that was a good move. I also think bringing back the likes of Maurice Hurst, again, I think he had a decent season in terms of what was expected. Shelby Harris, similar. Rodney McLeod, who again wasn't done straight away, is another one that's been brought back. So I think they've made some solid moves in terms of what they've done. And the rest of the pieces they've brought in, not necessarily spectacular, but I think we'll come on to some of the rule changes. I think the kickoff rule changes, it almost feels like the Browns had a bit of a heads up and an inside track on that, because a number of the moves they've made have been very much special teams related. I think Naeem Hines, good return man. That's been a problem for the Browns for years. It's kind of not been a problem in as much as the kickoffs become less and less of a play, whereas obviously now moving forward, there's every chance it becomes one again. So that's an interesting addition. And I also think the other one I'll just call out is, I think, Donta Foreman, and a good addition to the running back room. Don't know what's going to happen in terms of Nick Chubb and when he comes back. A lot more comfortable having, a sort of real workhorse back in there. I think Kareem Hunt came in and did a serviceable job last year, but I think it was very clear that unless you needed 1 yard and he was just going to pile himself in there, we needed a different option there. So I was quite pleased with that pickup as well. So an interesting sort of set of moves, quite low key. But overall, I think they've done a reasonable job. And like I say, I think it really just goes to show the strength of the roster heading into the off season. I don't think any of us on this podcast think we were a million miles away last year. If you think about all the things that they overcome to still get to where they got to. So like I say, quite pleased overall with the fairly low key off season.
I think I'll jump in just a minute, on the contract thing. Like, I think Sean does make a good point there. Like, on paper, you look at the deal now as like a top 20 APY wide receiver deal and think, yeah, maybe that's a little bit risky. But then you look at the wide receivers that are going to get paid soon. You're talking Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, Devonta Smith. There's a whole bunch of wide receivers that are going to get paid big money soon. And you look at those deals and they're going to be pushing past 30 million a year. So then you look at maybe giving 15 million to Jerry Jeudy, and then you're like, okay, that's going to be wide receiver 2 money for a while. And I think if you can get, Jeudy on, like, you look at a deal that got done this off season, for example, same draft class, or maybe Pittman was the year after, I can't quite remember, but Pittman gets 23 million a year. He's 26 going on 27 years old, so there's like 3 years gap there, and that's 8 million more per year. And I think he's like his reception numbers. I think he's had like 600 more yards than Jerry Jeudy over the course of his career. So you look at it in that aspect. Neither have had great QB play, so you can't really, make too many excuses on that side. But you look at it like that, and 8 million a year is a lot of money, really, isn't it? So I'm not too fussed on the contract at the moment. I think you can point to some AB re-signings or signings over the last few years, and you can look at them both ways. You can look at David Njoku, for example, as a contract that at the time of signing looked horrendous because he did not produce anything. But us as Browns fans knew that potential was there. If he could just cut out the drops a little bit, we knew that the potential to outperform that contract was definitely there. And that's what we've seen since. And then you can look at the opposite end of the spectrum and look at maybe Jack Conklin's extension, where, everyone thought, wow, that's quite a bit of money to be given Jack Conklin. Although he's a great player, he's very injury prone. And since then, he's been hurt too much to sort of make that contract look good. So
yeah, again, I don't think that I don't think that the issue is around, playing the upside. I think it's more of a case of saying that, it's recognizing that it is a gamble, like you said, Sean. And I don't think any of us here would disagree with that. But by the same token, and something which I think, Wayne, you touch upon, is I quite like the fact that our wide receiver 2 is now Jerry Jeudy. Being able to say Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore is a hell of a lot better than where we were at this time last year. And seeing that that improvement over time without losing anything to much on the back end, seeing as to where our roster is, I think our roster is still as strong as it was at the end of last year as well. It means that we are moving forward, of which is exactly what you're looking for it to do. So yeah, there's there's definitely pluses and minuses to it, but I think it's when looking at it in April, I think you can get bogged down too much in the numbers rather than the X's and O's and all the rest of it, and you obviously can't say a lot, as to whether it's going to play out, etc. And you can only hope that it's going to play out. And I hope it works out.
If you look at it, I think if we had a first-round pick this year, especially with the strength of this wide receiver class, I don't think you'd have seen this move. But I think it was so much of a risk to wait until 54 to see if you could have an impact player, a wide receiver, that I don't think it, much like last year, it was too much of a risk to wait until the second round to see if you could upgrade the receiver room there. It was too much of a risk to wait until 54 to see if they could get an impact player. So, like I said, covered the bases, and then if someone falls to you, you can still take them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Just before I touch on to the next question, my favorite free agency move, Jordan Hicks. I think that was a pretty good move, considering what I thought was probably the most surprising drain in free agency was our linebacker corp. I thought that adding someone like Hicks, his experience and consistency, was quite a shrewd move. One of which isn't necessarily flashy, but one of which is a very Andrew Berry move in that it is someone that's probably what you're going to get week in, week out. Shouldn't mean that we've got an issue in that gap. He's someone that stays on the field a lot. So there's a lot to like there. So just thought I'd add my 2 pence in there before moving on to the next one, of which is talking about those gaps. Is there any lever of this year's roster that you will miss the most? So I'll read you out the list which I've got here from Wikipedia as to who's gone where. So
the ever reliable Wikipedia.
The ever reliable Wikipedia. I tell you know what, it works well enough. So I won't go through the whole list because I don't think anyone's really going to miss Jeff Driscoll, for example. But Harrison Bryant going to the Raiders, Jordan Elliott to the 49ers, Joe Flacco has gone to the Colts, Mike Ford has gone to the Texans. Marquise Goodwin has not been picked up yet. Neither has Jakeem Grant. Let's see. Nick Harris has gone to the Seahawks. Kareem Hunt is a UFA. Kunashek is a UFA. Rodney. Did we not pick Rodney McLeod back up? So that might be a Jacob Phillips is a UFA according to this. James Prochet is a UFA according to this. I don't know when this was last updated, to be fair. This might be a little old.
Should we save you some bother, mate? I don't think that we've lost anybody that we're going to be particularly disappointed with. I think the obvious one from a sentimental point of view is Flacco, but just to touch on that, I think it's a pipe dream to think anybody that was in his camp he was ever going to be brought back, because like it or not, we've said this a million times, and you know what camp most of us on here are in. It's Deshaun Watson's team. They were not going to have a quarterback in the room that there was a clamour to play week one from the fan base. Simple and as straightforward as that. They've addressed the backup quarterback position, I think, quite well in terms of the options that were available. I actually really quite like the Tyler Huntley one in particular, because as much as anything, it's getting off the Ravens because he always comes in and beats us week 16. But I think out of all of them, I think, Taki's developed into a decent player. I think obviously, I think he's ended up in New England where he reunites with the general manager that was part of the sort of draft process when he was selected at Cleveland, I believe. So that made a ton of sense. I'm surprised in terms of a couple of the contracts that a couple of people got. I thought Harrison Bryant getting the best part of $4 million from the Raiders was a bit of a surprise. And I also think Jordan Elliott being picked up by the 49ers was a bit of a surprise when you think of the power that they've got on that line. Jordan Elliott feels very much like a spare part compared to everybody else. But I don't think really, I think this is the Browns model, isn't it? It's identify your core players, get them signed up on these 4 or 5 year deals, get them re-signed early. And a lot of these players we're talking about are people that you're just going to have rotating in and out for 1 year deals and 2 year deals. And I don't think there's I don't think there's a player on that list that anyone's going to look back and think, do you know what, that would have been the real difference if we could have just kept hold of that one guy. That will come in a couple of years' time. I think we'll get there because you can't keep everybody once you get to a certain level of sort of, roster, and we're not far away from that. There will be some difficult decisions in a few years' time, but I think in terms of where we are for the minute, I don't think anyone's particularly shedding any tears over anybody that's left. And apologies if either of you are, guys, but I think I'm probably covering off what most of us think there.
Any kind of rebuttal there, Owen? I mean, I look at Anthony Taylor and Shoni Takitaki as ones which I thought might leave a hole at linebacker, but the additions brought in very much sort of speak to what Sean said there.
Yeah, the only one that I would... Sean talked about sentimentality. I'm not too fussed on the Flacco sentimentality, but Nick Harris, funnily enough.
Do you know, I thought you were going to say Nick Harris.
Yeah.
Seems like a very you player to stan.
Yeah, he was really quite good last year, I thought, as a centre/fullback. So I would have loved to have seen him catch a touchdown pass before he left the Browns. And I thought that we would see that at some point last year.
It's all right. You might see it happen against us instead at some point.
Yeah, probably.
I do love the fact that even on the Browns official website, he's listed as fullback/centre. I think that's fantastic. Absolutely brilliant.
Oh God. And the thing is that is pretty much exactly how we used him. Fullback first, centre later. God, only the Browns. And that's probably very indicative as to where we were last year, to be quite honest. But no, like you say, Sean, it's a positive thing that we can talk about the levers in this sort of way, because it's what the good teams do. And it's been a long, long, long time since we've had our roster in such a position where you're not worrying about these, for lack of a better word and not wishing to offend, but mid players, who in years gone by, we would have heralded as, some of our favorites because we had no one else. So, it's definitely an upturn. That sort of thing definitely gives you a boost as you go forward. Right, looking elsewhere other than the Browns for now, what team during this period do you think ended up improving the most? Now, this obviously also, for those of you who don't have NFL notifications on or anything like that, Stefon Diggs is apparently being traded to the Texans today. For a couple of picks. That does not include a first round selection, which is interesting. So the Texans obviously doing even more moves there. But are there any teams that you two have identified as ones of which looking a little spicier after this?
Yeah,
I'll leave it open.
I'd got the Texans down before the news had come through. I'm quite impressed with what the Texans have done. I think Danielle Hunter is an upgrade for them. I think also bringing in Danico Autry, again, more presence on that line. Joe Mixon, I think, is an upgrade for them at running back. I'm quite glad that we don't get to see Joe Mixon 2 games a year because he seems to save his best games for Cleveland. But they're obviously taking advantage of the fact that they've got CJ Stroud on his rookie contract, and they're obviously going to just pile him with talent all around him. I think the obvious hole they had was wide receiver. They've obviously tried to address it, as you say, today with Diggs. He's getting older. I mean, we're all getting older, but you know what I mean. He's now. I'm not surprised that there's not a first rounder. Let's put it that way. And I also think that it's probably quite apparent that Buffalo were very keen to move on from him, which probably says a fair bit. So whether he's going to be the real difference maker, we'll wait and see. He could be actually a bit of a disruptive influence because he's one of those players. He seems to think that he should get 200 targets and nobody else should get any. He's one of those kind of characters, isn't he? So we'll wait and see how they handle that. But obviously, in terms of his attributes, he's obviously a very good wide receiver on his day. So I like what the Texans have done. I think the Vikings have done a fairly decent job as well. But also probably had the Bucs into there as well. The Bucs seemed as though they were on a bit of a a tipping point in terms of like Brady's last year, but I think they've sort of managed to maintain a bulk of that roster and sort of done
Keeping
quite
Mike
well.
Evans was huge.
Yeah,
the
I think
Bucks.
they've done quite well to keep as much of it together as they have without having to blow the whole thing up to start again, and obviously still being able to be competitive in division has obviously massively sort of benefited them. So they would be the three for me that I'd sort of got jotted down, before the news of today, and obviously the Diggs thing just probably puts an exclamation mark on the Texans.
Yeah, who the Vikings got as quarterback right now? Is it essentially Sam Darnold until the draft?
Yeah,
basically, yeah. But obviously they've added into that Aaron Jones. There's a few other bits and pieces.
Oh yeah, they've done really well around,
yeah.
and using that Kirk money obviously to get themselves good elsewhere. But I don't want to be starting week 1 with Sam Darnold. That goes from being an A tier summer to hiding behind the sofa, I think. But I'm not very high on Sam Darnold. I haven't been since day one. So yeah, looking at that, it's definitely an interesting one there. Owain, do you have a team in mind that you've seen and thought, yeah, they're doing the business?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think the Falcons have done good business over the summer. I'm not a big fan of Kirk Cousins. I think he's probably one of the most mid QBs in the league. But if you look at the improvement, they've gone from Desmond Ridder and whoever else they had, Taylor Heineke, to a QB that, when healthy, puts up a lot of good numbers year on year. And you look at that addition, you look at the wide receiver room they now have. Their 1, 2, and 3 is Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore they picked up in a trade. What the Cardinals are doing this offseason, I'm not sure. They leave Marquise Brown walk and then follow that up by trading Rondale Moore for Desmond Ridder, which was mind-boggling to me.
It's the same kind of GM chaos that the Texans had a few years back. It feels very reminiscent of that.
Surely, if you're going to trade Rondale Moore, you trade him for a pick, because what are you getting out of Desmond Ridder? You've got, obviously, Kyler Murray locked down there for a long time, so I just don't understand the rationale there. But yeah, going back to the Falcons, they've got a pretty formidable pass attack now, haven't they? With if Kirk Cousins come back off that Achilles completely healthy, you look at London, who is a really good wide receiver. Darnell Mooney has put up 1,000 yards before in the NFL. Rondale Moore is like the sort of gadget slot type player, can be really interesting when the ball's in his hand in space. And then you've obviously got Kyle Pitts, who started to come on a little bit last year as a very high drafted tight end. And we've seen ourselves that from David Njoku, after a few years, those tight ends can come into their own, the ones with big athletic traits. So that offense could be really, really good this year if Kirk Cousins comes back healthy. So yeah, they could be sneaky good next year. Their defense isn't bad either. Obviously got AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates as well on the back end of that defense. So they could be sneaky good.
Yeah. Two that I'm going to bring up, in part because it's Browns related, but also because I actually think they've had really good free agencies, annoyingly enough. The first one being the Steelers. I think no matter your opinion, Russell Wilson and, to a lesser extent, Justin Fields are better quarterbacks than any that the Steelers had on their roster. It's not close. It's not even a big gap. It's a huge gap. And when you consider that Mike Tomlin refuses to go down and have a losing season with the players that he's got, you add a QB difference like that, and that starts to worry me a little bit. I think that the one addition of which people are sleeping on a little bit is Patrick Queen going over there as well. That makes their defense even better. That's always been their linchpin, but that, Patrick Queen was always going to get a big money deal. And, 41 mil for 3 years, that seems about right. Dante Jackson, at corner as well is a really, really good pickup, I find as well. So, you've got those, and that makes the Steelers quite interesting, I find, this year. They're definitely not an also-ran that we put down last year. And, I mean, the Ravens didn't do a lot, but what they, getting Derrick Henry in as running back changes the way that you look at this Ravens offense. Realistically, I mean, J.K. Dobbins was, he's good. But you always felt like as long as you had Lamar covered, there was a good chance that you'd be able to break up a play. This time around, you literally have to double down on a run play pretty much every time, because there's at least 2 free options to run and then 1 to pass. But Lamar Jackson's gotten so much better at passing as well. I think it just changes the dynamic on how you defend them, of which was already difficult, and only a very, very small number of teams, of which the Browns I put in as one of them, knows how to defend the Ravens. And I think that by adding that, they're going to be very, very difficult to stop if they weren't already. So, I think that we've improved. The AFC North in general has improved. I think the Bengals are the ones which have been sort of left behind a little bit in the division at the end of this summer bit, but they've been able to hold on to pieces, at least for the time being. I can't wait for this Jamar Chase thing to blow up in their face eventually. I think that is around the corner. So keep your popcorn out for that. But, there's a lot going on here. And I think that the NFC South has gotten better. The AFC North has gotten better. And the Texans are becoming a real problem, I think, in the AFC as well, of which just means that the AFC continues to be iron sharpening iron, of which is always interesting.
I think the Ravens are actually interesting this offseason, because you mentioned the Derrick Henry signing as being, a good addition, which I agree with you, but Derrick Henry is getting older. He's got a lot of tread on the tires. You don't know when he's going to hit that wall. There has been a couple of signs over the last couple of years that he is starting to hit there. So you wonder if he takes a dip in that regard.
Oh, I reckon he does. I reckon that the Ravens style of play means he'll be able to take less reps.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. And like you said, they've got obviously Derrick Henry, J.K. Dobbins. I don't know how far Keaton Mitchell is away from recovering. Obviously, he got hurt badly towards the end of the last season, but he was good when he came in. But I think it's on the defensive side of the ball where I think the Ravens may have, they're obviously every year a problem defensively for every team in the AFC North, just like the Steelers are, and that obviously helps their offense a little bit. This year, they've lost the D coordinator, pretty much all the defensive staff as well, and their top 2 edge rushers now, I don't know if either of you have seen it, it's like Odafe Oweh and the guy out of Michigan a couple of years ago, Ajabo. So those are 2 like really unproven pass rushers to have as your edge rusher 1 and 2. So it will be interesting actually how they get on defensively this year. I think that's probably going under the radar a little bit, how much they've lost defensively.
Yeah, good shout. I'll put it this way, I really hope so, because I think that, offensively, I think that they're just getting better and better. I think that they made a shrewd move in changing up Lamar Jackson's style last year, and it worked. I think he's a much better quarterback now. You add just extra weapons, and just gives me nightmares in April. Football doesn't start till September. Right, let's do a bit of future gazing. This is where most of our questions actually came in. Basically, just a case of, what's our sense in terms of what are we likely to do next as the Browns? Are we likely to, is there a possibility that we dip back into free agency for, any kind of star player? Is there really any sort of intention to trade up in the draft? Are we likely to see someone traded out in order to do that, like Newsom, for example, anything like that? I mean, I'll kick off. I actually think that we're going to be quite serene for between now and April, and I think that we draft someone on the line either way, whether it's offensive or defensive, just because of the position, the draft position that we've got. I actually think that we're going to be quite. We're always looking to improve. I just don't see massive alarm bells at the moment as to where we would need that that extra push, especially when we're so close to having all of our assets back next year onwards. I think that we try and consolidate a little bit. What do you guys think? Owain, you're more in tune with the draft style of things. When you take all of that in, what do you reckon the Browns' next move is?
I'd find it hard pressed to see them going and doing anything else in free agency. I just think cap wise, player wise, I just don't think there's all that much room for it. So I don't think that they're going to go like down that route. But I think if we were going to see a Newsome trade, I think it may have happened already. I think the L'Jarius Sneed trade that was last week or the week before may have hurt the Browns in trading Newsome, because obviously there's a trade partner gone for a cornerback, and also the value. I think if the Browns traded Newsome away, I think they'd be looking at a second round pick of some sort. And to be honest, if they did get a second round pick in this year's draft, I would take that for Newsome. He's going into his last year, or maybe he's got an option year to come after that. But he's obviously not going to be a long-term piece of this defense.
Yeah.
If you're keeping Denzel Ward past, this year, next year, and then paying Martin Emerson as well, you're obviously not going to keep Greg Newsome. He'd be the odd man out there. So I think if they're going to, it would be my opinion to maximize the value and then to recoup an asset before he leaves for nothing. So I would personally do it for a second round pick. Whether they're going to get a second round pick or not, I don't know. But I think Cam Mitchell actually came in the limited amount that we saw him last year in the slot, and he did really well. So I don't think there would be a huge gap in the slot between those two, because let's face it, Newsome had his struggles last year, especially obviously the last time we saw him play in that Houston game. He got torched a number of times in that game. So yeah, if they're going to move up, I think that's the only way that they're going to do it. I think the other position that they may have been able to do it was tackle. I think, the Jed Will stuff before they restructured him, I think he may have been one of those candidates to sort of trade and get a pick or trade up. But obviously since they restructured him, that's not going to happen either. So Newsome would be the only one I think that you could see that happen for. Maybe we'll see a draft day trade Newsome out and we get something for him in the draft. But yeah, I don't know. I think we're going to see a relatively boring off season from the Browns from here. So, which isn't a bad thing, is it really?
No.
If we're being 100% honest. So, yeah, I don't think there'll be much happening, but that'll be the one thing to look out for, I think.
Yeah. Sean, I could pose the same question to you, or if it's going to be relatively similar, I could potentially rephrase it to something along the lines of, is there something which you wish the Browns would do in particular, between now and draft day?
I've just been having a look at the sort of free agents that are still available, because, like you say, it's often a sort of veteran guy that you sort of bring in at this stage that potentially, you bring in on a one-year deal as a bit of an upgrade. And I was looking at who's available. Justin Simmons, I think the safety that was released from Denver there, obviously sort of just clearing house. I think Justin Simmons is a really nice player. Juan Thornhill didn't set the world alight for me last year. But obviously, Justin Simmons at 30 probably doesn't really go with the Browns' general consensus of the way they do things. I think in terms of wide receiver, I don't think we're going to take one in the draft, because I think we've got enough investment in Cedric Tillman. I think that this is one of the other things for me with the Jerry Jeudy thing that we didn't touch on. You are taking reps away from other players. Now, there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, as long as they're obviously a key part of your offense. But if they did want to sort of take a bit of a flyer on a wide receiver, Tyler Boyd's still out there. Had a pretty poor year last year, but has been pretty consistent for the Bengals. generally operates from the slot. So if you did have Judy and Cooper on the outside, Tyler Boyd potentially, he's somebody. But again, like I say, I think they will just sort of stay packed, to be honest. I don't think they're going to do anything, of great deal. I honestly don't think the market's high for Newsom. I think if they were going to trade him, I think they would have probably traded him by now. I honestly don't. We kind of joked about it. I don't think they're going to be able to get anything more than a 4th, 5th round pick for Greg Newsom. I know Owen thinks we might still get a higher round pick, but I genuinely don't see that we will. And the other thing I would say is if you make that move, you're just creating another hole. We all love Denzel Ward, but it's no secret that he obviously, has had his fair share of injury concerns during his career. And, if we go through a period of 4 or 5 weeks again next season that he's missing, all of a sudden, if you haven't got Greg Newsom, you're sort of then looking at Cam Mitchell playing and starting on the outside. And then, I'm sort of scratching around to think who he's actually going to then be the nickel corner. So I honestly don't think they'll make any moves at all. I think they'll want to see more from Greg Newsom in terms of his sort of ability and where he was drafted and all that kind of thing. But I think it'll be relatively quiet between now and the draft. And then obviously we'll see what they do once we get to the draft itself.
No, that's astute there. Absolutely. Right. Tell you what, let's move away from player acquisitions, roster building, etc. Let's talk about some of the, for lack of a better word, some of the frillier things about the NFL at this time of year. There's always some sort of news story to keep us going. Rule changes is definitely one of them. I could try and explain the new kickoff rule to everyone on here, but I sincerely just ask you to Google it or YouTube it or something. I've just tried to find the most simplified version of it. I think that essentially you are, as a kicker, you don't want to kick it in the end zone. I think that's the main thing. I think that you're trying to keep it inbounds and that all the hand fighting is, a lot closer together. So you're not just like running into a brick wall if you're the kicking team. I think that's basically the long and the short of it. Do we like that? I mean, the XFL, I think, did it a couple of years ago when it came around. It seemed quite good to me at the time. I don't think it really changed too much, but, it's probably just a way of keeping kickoffs relevant, a general good.
I love it, mate. I was a big fan of the XFL bringing it in. I really enjoyed the sort of first edition of the XFL. It would have been the second edition that got cancelled with COVID. And I actually just think, for me, the kickoff has become a play that has been just an extension of an advertisement break for the last few years. And at least now, don't all of a sudden expect that there's going to be, return after return after return for touchdowns. That's not the point, but there will be. As opposed to probably a 95% touchback rate, it's probably going to be something like a 45% touchback rate because you will still get teams that boot out the end zone, all right, because I think the ball gets brought out to the 30. So there will be some teams that are quite happy to defend from there. But I do think it adds a bit of a tactical element to it. I think it obviously, like I say, does bring the return back in. And if nothing else, they need to try something because let's be honest, we may as well have got to the stage of just bringing the ball out to the 25 and just not bothering with the kickoff in most instances. So I personally am a big fan of it. It'll look a bit strange, but trust me, after a week or two, it's very, very obvious what's going on. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that one personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's something of which, if kickoff returns coming back into it, that's what. That's the steady diet of which sort of like brought me into the NFL a little by little. The first Super Bowl I watched was the Chicago Bears Indianapolis Colts one, where Hester scored the touchdown off the first play of the game from a kickoff return. Josh Cribbs doing return touchdowns for fun throughout the years and all the rest of it. So definitely one there. Owain, anything to add there?
Yeah, I do like it. For one reason and one reason only, is that it's increased the chances of seeing a Welsh player play in the NFL.
Yes, I tell you what, let's move straight onto that, shall we? I did have that little nugget for you right at the very end, just to give you that little. I was going to get the Welsh national anthem on and everything else, and it was going to be a real fanfare. But yes, Rees Zammit, the Welsh the Welsh rugby superstar who sensationally retired from rugby to go and try his luck in the NFL, despite not really actually doing much on the NFL pathway until he retired from rugby by the sounds of it. He's now the number 9 jersey wearer for the Kansas City Chiefs and was very almost a Cleveland Brown player, seemingly, considering that he chose Cleveland as one of the few places where he showed his stuff. So that was interesting for all of about 3 or 4 hours until that was quashed. But I tell you what, because I know that we've had UK players before in it, but this one feels a lot closer to home, I think, because the sentimentality of it, but also the fact that it's a rugby player. It's someone who you've seen as someone in something that you follow, and able to actually go across that code and seemingly a lot easier than. I mean, the only other example I can think of is Christian Wade, who went to the Bills and scored a preseason touchdown after 2 years. This seems a lot more elegant a way of going into it. What are your feelings about that? I mean, I imagine that there's a fair bit of excitement, even it is for them.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he does and how much of a chance he actually gets. I think I was quite skeptical when he actually did make the decision, not because I'm a die-hard Welsh rugby fan and we're a worse team without him, because that's not the case in any sense of the word. But I just thought the chances of him, playing an NFL snap were slim. I still think they're a little bit slim, but I think it's interesting. I know you mentioned the jersey number there, and that's not something massive, but interesting that they give him single figures. I thought interesting that they give him a 3-year deal as well.
Yeah, that is
not
interesting.
something I expected. I think with the expansion of like the extra practice squad place, I think it was quite likely that he was going to stick around for at least a year on a practice squad, because it's a no-brainer for any NFL team to carry that extra player, isn't it? So I thought he was going to stick on a practice squad, but in terms of actually playing an NFL game, an NFL snap, I thought was quite slim until that rule change came in. I think that gives him much, much better of a chance to stick. And I think it was really interesting. The first week after he announced his decision, he went on Sky Sports and he had an interview, and it was on at like halftime of one of the games on Sky Sports. And they asked him what position he wanted to play, and the first position he actually mentioned, other than wide receiver, like he didn't mention wide receiver, didn't mention running back. He actually mentioned kick returner. So you sort of put 2 and 2 together, and you think that maybe he's had a tip off before this rule change, that if he made this switch, it was much more likely that he would actually make a name for himself in the NFL as a player, not just as a little PR stunt that would then, end with him back in rugby within a year. So I do wonder if that sort of happened, and he's been told he's much more likely to actually play games as a kick returner, rather than just doing it for publicity. So listen, as a Welshman, I mean, it'd be a proud moment to see a Welsh player playing in the NFL. So I'm rooting for him, even though they're in the AFC, even though they're a pain in the arse when it comes to the NFL and they're always winning. It would be cool to see him, and he's gone to literally the best spot he could have. The Chiefs wide receiver room stinks. I know he's signed there as a running back essentially, but Chiefs wide receiver room stinks. They've added Marquise Brown, and looks like they may have lost Rashee Rice. Whatever happens, pending whatever happens there. So he may get a chance at wide receiver as well, as sort of gadget player. So yeah, all the power to him, and I hope he does well.
Yeah, just thought we'd give you your moment there. It was definitely on the list. It was definitely on the rundown. I have the receipts. We were definitely going to do that. The only other new rule of which I think I'm going to bring up, because I'm just looking at, we're almost hitting the hour actually. The abolition of the hip drop tackle. Now, Sean, I will allow. We gave Owain a little bit of a pedestal, bit of a soapbox. I saw you immediately shake your head, so the soapbox is yours for this one. You have, let's see, we're just about to hit 55 on this on the speedometer. We'll give you a whole minute for you to give me your thoughts on why the abolition of the hip drop battle is the death knell of the NFL.
No, look, I think in terms of player safety, you can understand why they've done it, but I just think it's one of those things that is such a subjective call at the time that this is going to be almost nigh on impossible to officiate. And you can just imagine the defense gets a big third down stop, and all of a sudden a yellow flag comes in. It's a hip drop
It's
tackle,
nailed on.
It's just going to be. I just think it's going to be an absolute nightmare, to be honest. It's a really difficult thing to sort of even explain, even if you Google what is the hip drop tackle. It's essentially a defender becoming dead weight and sort of wrapping himself around the player. But I just think it's becoming increasingly difficult to play defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. The rules are very much for the offense, which, we understand that. We want to see scoring plays. We want to see touchdowns and all of that kind of good stuff. But on the flip side of it, you want the game to be competitive. And you think about the defense that the Browns are building, where they won a lot of games behind the back of the defense. Ultimately, it's always been a game where there's, the superstars on both sides of the ball. And I just think this is another nail in the coffin for that side of it. And I just think it's a little bit, like I say, because it's so subjective, what is, what isn't. You can guarantee the first time it is a really consequential call in a game, it'll be talked about for the rest of the week in the NFL.
Oh, absolutely. You just know there's going to be one in a big moment as well, like you say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's absolutely coming. The only good thing about it is that highlight of DK Metcalf sprinting like 90 yards to catch a guy who should put it in the end zone will never be shown again because it's an illegal tackle. Reckless. Should never be in the sport. Apparently. Yeah, we're allergic to highlights, apparently. Couple of other rule changes as well. We won't discuss them here, but the trade deadline's been bumped up a week to week 9. I think that that was a Steelers amendment to a Browns initiative to try and get bumped up. So I think it was week 11 that Andrew Berry tried to get it bumped up to. It was 10 or 11. It ended up going up a week to week 9. Also, and this is, we got 2 Browns pieces to end the show on, and I'll just ask you for both of your, for both of these in one from you both as we wrap the show up. So the first thing is there seems to be a consensus around NFL talking heads that the Brazil game for kickoff, of which is not the initial game, which will be obviously held at Arrowhead Stadium, where the Chiefs will make their debut. It's for the day after, the Friday night. Brazil are hosting the Philadelphia Eagles against obviously one of their road opponents. Apparently it'll be either the Browns or the Packers. That is the consensus. There's been a few hints thrown about that it's going quite likely to be the Browns. So would like to hear your thoughts on that. And then also in stadium news, because yes, that comes up at least once a year, the Haslams have apparently bought land in Brook Park, which is about 15-minute drive down the road from where they currently are. It's not in the city of Cleveland, but it's in it's kind of in the outskirts of the Cleveland area. It's still classed as Cleveland, but I don't believe it's in the city of Cleveland, of which has caused all sorts of obstination. And realistically, it's a case of, realistically, surely it's going to have a dome on it, right? It's the only reason as to why you'd go on and build that sort of thing, and this is probably something of which would irritate US fans to the hilt, but fans over in the UK could probably appreciate this. Do you really mind all that much, considering, and just think it's just something which is a problem that we're not necessarily needing to worry about? Owain, let's start with you.
They need to build a dome, and they need to build one as quick as they possibly can. I think they've obviously invested a lot in the pass game over the last few years, and you can't be having games of 100-mile-an-hour wind ruining what you've built. I think the long-standing argument against it has been the Cleveland Browns are, such a hard team, and the place itself for blue-collar people that love the wind, love the snow, love the rain. The Saints, who are a dome team, came into First Energy Stadium when there was snow everywhere and bullied the Browns and won the game. It's not, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't give the Browns home field advantage. So I think the argument's been stupid for a long time. And I think as spectators who pay to watch the sport, surely you want to watch the sport at its full potential. And I think you get to do that when it's in a dome. You get to see the players play, properly and how they like playing, as opposed to when the wind's there, it ruins games. When you go back to that Texans game we played in that stadium when Watson was with the Texans, and the game was terrible. Literally, we just saw 100 run plays from both teams, and we ended up winning, I want to say 12-7, and the game was just terrible. I just think we could do without watching 2 or 3 games like that every season. So for me, build a dome, build it quick.
Fair. Sean?
Yeah, look, selfishly, it makes no difference to us where it is, does it? So,
there's a reason why I said what I said.
Absolutely, mate. Our opinion might be slightly skewed, but I think everyone's just sort of really spelt it out. It's not an advantage. I just find it the most bizarre thing that people talk about is an advantage. It's like people think our players, when it's bucketing down of snow, spend all the time on the practice field out there. They often cancel practice and bring things inside when it's snowing. It's just the most bizarre thing in the world. It makes for a crap game, a crap viewing experience. Just build the dome. The other thing is, for the people of Cleveland, surely that then makes things like the Super Bowl a possibility, even though it's a remote possibility because it's Cleveland, it's not a big market. Well, it certainly becomes at least a possibility if you've got the facilities in the stadium in which to do it. And then, it's not just the NFL, it's obviously other things that it could be used for as well. So, for me, absolutely, you get that done, you get that built. I mean, that for me is the most likely, or should be the scenario that plays out anyway, because I think, as you say, if you've got the best team, if you put it on a level playing field, more often than not, the best team wins. You enter sort of, these sort of, variables. It's a bit like saying to a non-league team in the FA Cup, do you want to play in a dome, or do you want to sort of bring Man City down to your bobbly pitch that's got bloody potholes in it and whatever else? You're going to have more chance playing on your own turf, aren't you? So, ultimately, mate, yeah, get the dome built. That's what I would say. And I've got to be honest, I forgot what your other question was, mate.
Eagles. Brazil.
Yeah. Look, again, selfishly, for our reasons, I think we all want it on Sunday night, week 1. It's become a bit of a tradition for us that we get together and we enjoy the week 1 festivities with all the other NFL fans. I think probably for the franchise, it's a big thing if they can get it in terms of the national exposure and everything. I think the other thing is probably he's playing the Eagles in Brazil easier than playing them in Philadelphia. You'd argue it probably is neutral field and everything. So from that point of view, it probably, from the Browns' perspective, they want it. Selfishly, give me the Sunday afternoon kickoff.
And selfishly as well, I think that makes the possibility of them playing in London probably less. I may be wrong on that, but I'm sure they have to play overseas a certain amount, like every so often, and that takes away that from us and that London game. So I'm with Sean, selfishly, it would be nice to see them on a Sunday in America until they come over and we can watch them.
I have to admit, I honestly thought the Browns were going to be. I had this feeling that the Browns were going to be playing in Frankfurt. Don't know why.
Which would have been nice.
We would have had a weekend, folks. That would have been the case, but unfortunately, not to be the case. And yet, it's just selfish reasons, really. Kind of what we're here for, really. And it's just a different fan experience to those over in Cleveland. So I think
Sean made a good point there, though, that I hadn't actually thought about with playing the Eagles away.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Is much bigger advantage than. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. That's a good point.
Yeah. He's had a while to think about that. See, he had the selfish stuff down about 3 weeks ago when we first started talking about it on WhatsApp. He's been able to think of the other side now and be able to get in my head. I did not have that in Sean's repertoire, and he's made me look an absolute fool on this first pod back. Right, gents, I tell you what, we'll leave it there. We've just hit 5 minutes over on that. Cheers to everyone that has listened tonight. Do give us a like on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is that you're listening on, Spotify. Give us a follow on that as well. Honestly, it all helps. We'll be back in, I'd probably say, a couple of weeks for a pre-draft show. I've just seen the date of the draft, and literally that week I'm coming back from Holland, so I need to make sure I'm actually in. So we'll probably do it the week before. Yes, I'm thinking out loud, because if I don't do it, these two don't hold me to account. And then it's about a month until we actually talk again. So we'll do one pre-draft. We'll do one as a draft reaction pod as well afterwards, which will probably be just the week after, once we've got over the sleep deprivation. Because hell, even though we're not picking in the first round, you better believe I'm watching it still. And then after that, we'll probably just pop back on every now and then, just to chill out, talk about things Browns, maybe not things Browns. Maybe we talk about other, like the USFL. I believe that Sean's going to be watching whatever the bastardization of the XFL is, whatever the hell that. Maybe that's already happening. God knows. Is it currently happening?
Yeah, didn't Matt Corral lit it up the other day, didn't he? I was seeing on Twitter.
So that shows you just how much I'm actually into the. Is it the USFL? Have I got that right at least? Yeah, the adverts had some effect. So yeah, we'll find something to talk about in the summer as well. But come back in a couple of weeks. That's us, Sean, Owain. Thank you very much, guys. We will speak soon. And until then, go Browns.